The underestimated human. Commander Thyrix Khan flexed his massive arms as he gazed out at the Nexus combat arena, watching maintenance drones prepare the battlefield for another day of conquest. Standing nearly 10 feet tall, his crystalline exoskeleton caught and refracted the arena's lights into brilliant patterns across his body. The Zeltharian warrior had held the championship title for 8 consecutive cycles, crushing every challenger with his devastating combination of brute strength and advanced combat technology. The arena itself was a marvel of galactic engineering, capable of adapting to any environment or combat scenario. Energy barriers separated different atmospheric zones to accommodate various species, while the central fighting platform could transform from volcanic rock to Arctic ice within seconds. 60,000 spectators from across the known galaxy filled the massive structure, their excited chatter creating a symphony of alien languages. "Another pathetic challenger approaches, Commander," announced his aide, Lieutenant Vex, a smaller Zeltharian whose own exoskeleton bore the scars of countless training sessions. "This one claims to represent a species called humans from a backwater world designated Earth." Thyrix turned his 6 amber eyes toward the viewing screen, each orb focusing independently on the image of his next opponent. What he saw made him laugh, a sound like grinding stone that echoed through his private preparation chamber. The creature stood barely half his height, with soft pink skin completely vulnerable to attack. No natural armor, no visible weapons, no enhanced musculature that would indicate genetic modification. "Surely this is some kind of jest," Thyrix rumbled, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute dominance. "The Galactic Combat Commission has grown desperate if they're sending prey animals to face me." The human on the screen moved with an odd fluidity that Thyrix initially dismissed as weakness. Her name, according to the data feed, was Captain Sarah Chen. She wore simple combat fatigues and basic protective gear that looked primitive compared to the advanced technology other species brought to the arena. Her dark hair was pulled back efficiently, and her brown eyes seemed to take in every detail of her surroundings with methodical precision. "What special accommodations does this creature require?" Thyrix asked, already bored with the prospect of such an easy victory. "Reduced gravity. Atmospheric supplements. Perhaps we should pad the arena wall so it doesn't hurt itself when I throw it around." Lieutenant Vex consulted his data tablet, his expression growing puzzled. "Actually, Commander, the human has requested standard arena conditions. No modifications whatsoever. She even declined the offer of enhanced protective equipment." This gave Thyrix pause. In his 8 cycles as champion, every challenger had demanded some form of environmental adjustment or technological enhancement. Even the proudest warrior species sought every possible advantage when facing him. The Korthek Battle Kings brought their plasma shields. The Draknari warlords insisted on low-light conditions to enhance their natural night vision. The silicon-based Quarrens required specific atmospheric pressure levels. "Show me her previous matches," Thyrix commanded, his tactical mind finally engaging despite his initial dismissal. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Sarah Chen's qualification rounds. She had faced 3 different alien species to earn her place in the championship bout, and each fight had ended the same way, with her opponent on the ground while she remained standing. What struck Thyrix was not just her victories, but how she achieved them. Against a Morthic berserker whose rage-fueled strength could bend steel, Sarah had simply moved around the arena until her opponent exhausted himself, then struck precisely at nerve clusters to induce paralysis. Facing a Viltrian speedfighter whose reflexes operated at superhuman levels, she had used the arena's environmental hazards to force her opponent into disadvantageous positions. Most remarkably, when confronted by a Nexian psychic warrior who could predict opponent moves through mental projection, Sarah had somehow masked her intentions completely, moving in ways that defied prediction. "Interesting," Thyrix admitted grudgingly. "The creature shows some basic cunning, But cunning means nothing against overwhelming power. He activated his combat suit's systems, watching as diagnostic displays confirmed all weapons and defensive measures were operating at peak efficiency. The suit was a masterwork of Zeltharian engineering, incorporating energy shields, strength amplifiers, tactical sensors, and weapon systems that could level small buildings. Against this primitive human, it would be like using a starship cannon to kill an insect. The arena's announcement system crackled to life, broadcasting in hundreds of languages simultaneously. Citizens of the galaxy, prepare for the championship bout of the cycle. Defending his title for the 37th time, the undefeated, the unstoppable, Commander Thyrix Khan of Zelthar Prime. The crowd erupted as Thyrix emerged from the preparation tunnels, his crystalline form catching and amplifying the arena lights into a dazzling display. He raised all four of his arms in his signature victory pose, triggering another wave of cheers from his supporters. The championship crown, a circlet of rare quantum-forged metal that marked him as the supreme warrior of the galaxy, gleamed atop his head. And his challenger, the announcer continued, though with noticeably less enthusiasm, representing the recently discovered world of Earth, Captain Sarah Chen. The human emerged from the opposite tunnel to a mixture of curious murmurs and dismissive laughter. She looked even smaller in the vast arena, a lone figure walking calmly across the combat platform, while 60,000 alien eyes evaluated her chances of survival. If the attention bothered her, she showed no sign of it. They met at the center of the arena. The size difference even more dramatic up close. Thyrix could have picked up the human with one hand, yet she looked up at him without a trace of fear or intimidation. Her eyes met his with steady confidence that he found oddly unsettling. "Any final words, little creature?" Thyrix asked, his voice amplified by the arena's audio systems. "Perhaps you would prefer to yield now and keep all your limbs attached to your body." Sarah tilted her head slightly, studying him with the same methodical attention she had shown in the preparation chamber recordings. "You know," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite its quieter tone, "I've studied every one of your fights, Commander. 36 victories, all achieved through the same basic strategy: overwhelm opponents with superior strength and technology." "Because it works," Thyrix replied, confusion creeping into his voice. Why was this doomed creature lecturing him about combat tactics? "Against opponents who tried to match your strengths, yes," Sarah agreed. "But I'm curious about something. In all those fights, how many opponents tried to use your size against you?" Before Thyrix could respond, the starting klaxon sounded, its deep note reverberating through the arena. Combat protocols engaged automatically, activating environmental hazards and energy barriers that would prevent either combatant from leaving the platform until the match concluded. Thyrix's opening move was textbook perfect, a devastating overhead strike with both primary arms that would crush most opponents instantly. His combat suit's predictive systems calculated impact trajectories and force distribution, ensuring maximum damage delivery. The attack was flawless in its execution. It connected with nothing but air. Sarah had moved at the last possible second, not away from the attack, but toward Thyrix, slipping between his massive legs in a fluid motion that his targeting systems hadn't predicted. Before he could adjust, she had rolled behind him and was back on her feet. "What?" Thyrix spun around, his massive frame requiring several seconds to change direction. The human was already moving again, staying just outside his reach, while his combat suit recalibrated its tracking systems. "Thing about being really big," Sarah said conversationally, jogging backward to maintain distance, "is that you have to move all that mass around. Takes time and energy." Thyrix snarled and activated his suit's speed enhancement systems, hydraulics hissing as they amplified his movement capabilities. He lunged forward with superhuman velocity, all four arms coordinating in a pattern that should have been impossible to evade. Sarah dove under the attack, rolled between his legs again, and this time did something that made the crowd gasp collectively. As she passed beneath him, She struck upward with precise timing, hitting the hydraulic coupling that powered his left leg enhancement. Sparks flew from Thyrix's combat suit as the damaged system went into emergency shutdown. His enhanced speed vanished instantly, leaving him stumbling as his suit's weight distribution shifted unexpectedly. The crowd's cheers turned to confused murmurs. "How did you know?" Thyrix demanded, diagnostics flashing warning signals across his helmet display. "That coupling is protected by 6 layers of armor." Sarah paused in her constant movement, just for a moment, and smiled. "I told you, Commander. I studied all your fights. Every time you use speed enhancement, you favor your right side because of an old injury to your left shoulder. That creates stress fractures in the supporting systems. Basic mechanical engineering." The revelation hit Thyrix like a physical blow. No opponent had ever analyzed his combat style so thoroughly. Most challengers focused on trying to match his strengths or exploit obvious weaknesses. This human had identified patterns in his fighting style that he wasn't even consciously aware of. Rage filled his system as he realized he was being systematically dismantled by what he had considered an inferior being. He activated every system in his combat suit simultaneously: energy shields, weapon arrays, sensory enhancements, and strength amplifiers all coming online at once. Power readings spiked dangerously, but he no longer cared about system limitations. "I will crush you like the insect you are," he roared, his voice distorted by the suit's overloaded audio systems. Energy beams lanced out from his weapon arrays, scorching the arena floor as Sarah moved with impossible fluidity between the deadly streams. His targeting computers couldn't lock onto her movement patterns, predicting she would be in one location while she appeared in another. It was as if she could see the future and was always one step ahead of his attacks. But Thyrix's overwhelming power was beginning to tell. The arena platform was finite, and eventually the human would run out of room to maneuver. He pressed his attack relentlessly, pouring energy into his weapon systems, while his suit's strength amplifiers allowed him to throw chunks of the arena floor like projectiles. Then Sarah did something completely unexpected. Instead of continuing to evade, she stopped running and turned to face him directly. "My turn," she said quietly. What happened next would be analyzed by combat tacticians across the galaxy for decades to come. Sarah Chen, representing humanity in its first Galactic Combat Championship, began her counterattack with a move so simple and effective that it redefined how the galaxy viewed both humans and the nature of combat itself. She picked up a piece of debris from Thyrix's energy attacks, a fragment of crystallized arena flooring about the size of her fist, and threw it with perfect accuracy at the primary power coupling for his energy shields. The small projectile, moving at a fraction of the speed of his sophisticated weapons, passed through his defensive systems completely undetected because they were calibrated to stop much larger threats. The power coupling shattered with a cascade of sparks, and Thyrix's energy shields collapsed entirely. For the first time in 8 cycles, the champion of the galaxy stood vulnerable in the arena. The crowd fell into stunned silence as they processed what they had just witnessed. "Impossible," Thyrix whispered, his voice barely audible through his suit's failing audio systems. Sarah began walking toward him, no longer running or evading. Her movement was purposeful and controlled, like a predator approaching wounded prey. "You want to know the difference between humans and most other species in this galaxy, Commander." Thyrix raised his weapons, but his targeting systems were malfunctioning along with his shields. His massive size, which had been his greatest advantage, now felt like a liability as he struggled to track the much smaller opponent closing the distance between them. "Most species evolved as apex predators on their worlds," Sarah continued, still walking steadily forward. "You developed strength, speed, natural weapons, advanced technology. You were at the top of your food chains from the beginning." She was close enough now that Thyrix could have grabbed her with his bare hands, but something in her calm confidence made him hesitate. This was not the behavior of prey. This was something else entirely. Humans evolved differently. Sarah said, stopping just outside his reach. "We weren't the strongest or fastest on our world. We were the ones who learned to think, to adapt, to turn our enemies' strengths against them. We survived by being smarter, not stronger." Thyrix swung at her with desperate fury, but his damaged systems were too slow. Sarah stepped aside effortlessly and struck the manual release for his helmet seals. The championship crown tumbled from his head as his helmet disengaged, clattering across the arena floor with a sound that seemed to echo forever. "That's the thing about being an apex predator," Sarah said as Thyrix stumbled backward, his suit's failures cascading through multiple systems. "You never learn what to do when you meet something that refuses to be prey." The undefeated champion of the galaxy collapsed to his knees as his combat suit finally shut down completely, leaving him trapped inside several tons. The crown falls. The silence in the Nexus combat arena stretched on for what felt like an eternity. 60,000 alien spectators struggled to process the impossible scene before them. Commander Thyrix Khan, the undefeated champion who had crushed every challenger for 8 cycles, knelt trapped inside his own combat suit while a human half his size stood calmly beside his fallen crown. Emergency protocols activated throughout the arena as medical drones swarmed toward the platform, their sensors detecting the catastrophic failure of Thyrix's combat systems. The Zeltharian's crystalline exoskeleton had lost its brilliant luminescence, leaving him looking dulled and ordinary. His breathing was labored, not from physical injury, but from the psychological shock of defeat. "This cannot be happening," he gasped, his voice no longer amplified by his suit's audio systems. "I am Thyrix Khan. I am undefeated. I am the champion of the galaxy." Sarah crouched down beside him, her expression neither mocking nor sympathetic, but rather curious. "You keep saying what you are instead of asking who I am. That's been your problem from the beginning, Commander." In the VIP viewing section, Grand Admiral Orcs of the Galactic Combat Commission leaned forward in his hover seat, all 3 of his heads focused intently on the human. As a tripodal, he could process multiple information streams simultaneously, and what he was seeing challenged everything he thought he knew about species hierarchy in the galaxy. "Run full biometric analysis on the human," he commanded his aide. "I want to know everything about this creature's capabilities." The analysis results scrolled across his personal display, and each data point deepened his confusion. Sarah Chen's physical specifications were utterly unremarkable by galactic standards. No enhanced strength, no superior reflexes, no advanced sensory capabilities. By every metric the Commission used to evaluate combat potential, she should have been eliminated in the preliminary rounds. Back on the arena floor, Thyrix was struggling to understand his defeat. His tactical computer had recorded the entire fight, and reviewing the data only made his confusion worse. "Your species has no natural weapons," he said, staring up at Sarah. "No enhanced physical capabilities. No advanced technology. How did you predict my attack patterns?" Sarah stood and walked over to retrieve his fallen crown, examining the quantum-forged metal with professional interest. "Because you've been fighting the same way for 8 cycles, and everyone who faced you tried to beat you at your own game. They brought bigger weapons, stronger armor, more advanced technology. They all made the same mistake." "What mistake?" Thyrix asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to hear the answer. "They fought you like you were the enemy," Sarah replied, tossing the crown gently in her hand. "But you're not the enemy, Commander. You're just another puzzle to solve." The medical drones had reached the platform and were working to extract Thyrix from his disabled combat suit. Their cutting tools sparked against the advanced materials, requiring several minutes to create enough openings for emergency extraction. During this time, Sarah continued her explanation, speaking as much to the arena's audio pickups as to the fallen champion. "Humans have a saying, 'Know your enemy and know yourself, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles.' I spent months studying not just your fights, but your psychology, your species' cultural patterns, your technological dependencies. You were never my enemy, Thyrix. You were a problem that needed solving. Grand Admiral Corex processed this statement through his 3 brains simultaneously, reaching the same conclusion from different analytical angles. This human hadn't won through superior combat ability, but through superior intelligence gathering and pattern recognition. It was a fundamentally different approach to warfare than anything in the Galactic database. Impossible. Lieutenant Vex protested from the preparation area, his voice carrying over the arena's communication system. No single being could analyze 8 cycles of combat data and identify exploitable patterns. The processing requirements alone would exceed most biological neural networks. Sarah looked up toward the preparation area, somehow knowing exactly where Thyrix's aide was positioned despite the distance and angle. You're right, Lieutenant. No single being could do that analysis alone. She paused for effect, letting the implication sink in. But I wasn't alone. The revelation sent ripples of unease through the alien spectators. If the human had outside assistance, it raised questions about the integrity of the competition. But more disturbing was the implication that an entire species had cooperated to analyze their combat champion. My species has something you might not understand, Sarah continued, her voice carrying clearly through the arena's acoustics. We call it collective intelligence. When one human faces a problem too complex for individual solution, we share information, collaborate, build on each other's insights. I studied your fights, Commander, but I had help from military analysts, xenobiologists, engineers, and combat specialists from across my homeworld. Thyrix was finally extracted from his combat suit, his massive form looking strangely vulnerable without its technological enhancement. The medical drones conducted their scans and determined he was physically unharmed, though his psychological state remained questionable. He sat on the arena floor, staring at the human who had systematically dismantled 8 cycles of dominance. But why? He asked, his voice hollow with defeat. Why did your species invest such resources in defeating me? What do you gain from this victory? Sarah's expression grew serious as she considered the question. The arena fell silent again, sensing that her answer would be significant. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of species-wide conviction. Because you weren't just defeating individual challengers, Commander. You were reinforcing a galactic hierarchy that placed humans at the bottom. Every victory you achieved sent a message that newer species, like mine, could never hope to compete with established powers. That we should accept our designated place and be grateful for whatever scraps of respect we were thrown. She walked closer to Thyrix, close enough that only he could hear her next words. My species doesn't accept limitations imposed by others. We never have. When someone tells us we can't do something, we find a way to prove them wrong. Grand Admiral Corex was receiving constant updates from intelligence analysts throughout the galaxy, all trying to assess the implications of humanity's first championship victory. The reports painted a disturbing picture of a species that operated fundamentally differently from established galactic norms. Humans, according to the preliminary analysis, didn't just cooperate within their species, they actively sought out challenges that seemed impossible and then devoted considerable resources to overcoming them. Their history was filled with examples of individuals and groups achieving things that should have been beyond their capabilities through sheer determination and creative problem-solving. Sir, his aide whispered urgently, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Human merchant vessels are requesting access to previously restricted markets. Human diplomats are scheduling meetings with species that have never acknowledged them before. Human exploration ships are filing navigation plans for sectors they were previously banned from entering. The Admiral's 3 heads turned toward each other in the tripodal expression of deep concern. Humanity hadn't just won a combat championship. They had used that victory as a lever to shift their entire species' position in galactic society. On the arena floor, Sarah was helping Thyrix to his feet and gestured at surprised many observers. The Zeltharian towered over her even without his combat suit, but he seemed diminished somehow as if defeat had physically reduced his presence. "I don't understand you," Thyrix admitted, accepting her assistance despite his confusion. "You could claim the championship crown. You could demand tribute from my homeworld. You could use this victory to advance your species' political position. Yet you help your defeated opponent." Sarah smiled, the first truly warm expression she had shown since entering the arena. "That's another thing about humans, Commander. We don't fight to destroy our enemies. We fight to solve problems. You were never the problem. The system that made this fight necessary was the problem." She picked up the championship crown and examined it once more, then made a decision that would be remembered throughout galactic history. Instead of placing it on her own head, she set it down on the arena platform exactly halfway between herself and Thyrix. "I don't want your crown," she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive arena. "Crowns represent hierarchy, and hierarchy was what we were fighting against. Keep your title, Commander. But remember that it doesn't make you better than anyone else. It just means you won some fights." The crowd erupted into chaos as spectators tried to process this unprecedented development. In 30,000 years of galactic combat sports, no victor had ever refused the championship crown. Sarah's action challenged the fundamental purpose of the competition itself. Thyrix stared at the crown, then at Sarah, then back at the crown. "If you don't want the championship, what do you want?" "Respect," Sarah replied simply. "Not just for me, but for my species. Recognition that being new to the galaxy doesn't make us inferior. The right to be judged by our actions rather than our appearance or technology level." She turned to address the entire arena, her voice somehow carrying without technological amplification. "My species doesn't want to rule the galaxy or replace existing power structures. We just want the chance to contribute, to be part of the galactic community as equals rather than supplicants." Grand Admiral Corex realized he was witnessing a pivotal moment in galactic history. The humans' victory had been impressive, but her response to that victory was revolutionary. By refusing the symbols of dominance, she had transformed a combat sport into a diplomatic statement. "What happens now?" Thyrix asked, still staring at the abandoned crown. Sarah began walking toward the arena exit, her part in the spectacle apparently finished. "Now you decide what kind of champion you want to be, Commander. You can try to rebuild the same system of dominance through strength, or you can help build something better." She paused at the edge of the platform and looked back one final time. "The choice is yours. But remember, humans will be watching. And we're very good at solving problems when they arise." As Sarah Chen disappeared into the preparation tunnels, leaving behind a confused champion, a shocked audience, and a galaxy that would never quite be the same, the Nexus combat arena slowly began to empty. Conversations in hundreds of languages buzzed with speculation about what humanity's emergence might mean for established galactic order. The crown remained on the arena floor, unclaimed and somehow diminished, while maintenance drones began their post-combat cleanup routines. It would stay there for 3 full days before Thyrix finally picked it up, and when he did, observers noted that he wore it differently than before, as if it had become a burden rather than a symbol of pride. In the months that followed, applications from human candidates flooded into galactic institutions that had previously never considered non-traditional species. Trade requests, diplomatic overtures, and scientific collaboration proposals arrived at a rate that overwhelmed existing bureaucratic systems. Humanity had announced its presence in the galaxy not through conquest or intimidation, but through the simple demonstration that established hierarchies were not immutable laws of nature. They were just problems waiting to be solved. And humans, as they had proven in the Nexus combat arena, were exceptionally good at solving problems.